God kväll alle sammen. Long day and driving home now, and wanted to make a video about the different types of magic. So this will be a cool one as well, speaking about the history of some magical spells that we're going to be looking at. So we can break it down in three types of magic that we find in written texts. Now you find total Christian magic, you find Christian magic with pagan influence, and you find completely 100% pagan spells. And there are not very many of those still written, and those were not allowed to continue. Those have all died out. So why is that? Well, we're going to examine that now. Why are all the pagan spells gone? Well, the Christians burned them all. That's why, like they did everything else. Not just in the Norse world, but they did it in England. They did it with the Celts, they did it with the Gauls, the Germanic tribes, Romans, even ancient Greece, as early as the 3rd or 4th century. As soon as Christianity was accepted, they burned everything. They burned all the books that the pagans had. They burned all the temples, all the libraries, sacred places. They cut down sacred trees. And magic books would have been exactly the same. We for sure know that there were more magic books, but the Christians burned it all. Now, the Christians were not against magic. They were not against magic at all, because we see a long, long tradition of Christianity and other Abrahamic religions using magic. Think of Solomon or the Kabbalah in Judaism. So magic was not forbidden by the Christians, and in the medieval times, Christians actually liked to use magic. There were most of the magic books in the medieval times were written by priests, actually. So it wasn't that they didn't like magic, it was that they didn't like pagan magic. But we still see evidence that pagan magic lived on. Like I said, we find some pagan spells in written texts. There's not many. There's a small handful of them, like I said, because all of them were burned out. And we find also in other spells, there's some pagan influence in that as well. And that was because there was a historian in the 1800s. His name was Oliver Davies, English guy, and he wrote and noted that the spells that continued to exist from pagan times were spells of like a natural type. So these spells were like, remedies. They were mostly herbs, mostly herbal potions and herbal remedies and things like that. Odin's 9 herbs charm is a perfect example of that. 100% pagan spell, and that was allowed to live on. And this was because the Christians would continue to use that, and they thought that was acceptable as a spell to let it continue, because these spells of pagan origin, all they were doing was manipulating natural things like herbs and natural plants that you would find around there, and these things were created by God anyway. So they were just manipulating those things, so these were not outlawed at all. In fact, they were used very widely by the Christians. So that's why, and that's about the only written examples of pagan spells that we find today. But like I said, there are lots more spells that seem very Christian, but they have very pagan influence, and we're going to be looking at all those. So that's about it for this video. See you next time.